Gata, funcționează. Okay, so hello again. We are glad to see you again. Okay, so hello. And I would like to welcome Daniela Zambrini, who will be our guest for this afternoon. And Daniela will present us a very interesting presentation about technical communication English and other concepts that are very important in our domains. Daniela, you have the floor, and I let you introduce yourself to our mixed audience. We have also students who are present today, and other translators and other people who are interested in this topic. Thank you for accepting our invitation, and you have the floor now.
Thank you so much. I hope the screen sharing goes well. It is always my anxious.
Yes, let me verify. Yes, you can share your screen.
I can share my screen. Okay. So before I start sharing my screen, just 30 seconds about me. My name is Daniela Zambrini. I'm half Irish and half Italian. I worked in the airline industry for over 30 years, with a parallel career in technical translation and technical communication, which is now my, let's say, full-time activity. And I have been part of the Simplified Technical English Maintenance Group since 2014. So I am really happy and honored to have been invited to this session. I visited the DGT many years ago when I was completing my master in specialized translation. So it's sort of like closing a circle with full honors, and I am really happy to be here. So let me see if I can start my screen. Let's see if it's working. Yes, it seems like it's working. So thank you all for being here and welcome back after the lunch break. Today, I'd like to guide you through ASD STE 100, Simplified Technical English, or STE for short, not only as a language standard, but as a practical tool for improving clarity, safety, and translatability in technical communication. So let me just begin with a quick roadmap about our session today. I start with a simple question: why does the language matter so much in technical communication? Then I'll connect language with safety and human factors, explain where and when language can become a risk, and introduce STE itself. After that, I look at some common misconceptions, the basic structure of the standard with a few practical examples, before ending with a short rewrite demonstration and some resources, including your link to request your free official copy of issue 9 of the standard. So let me start with the broader point, why language matters in the first place. So technical communication now operates in global and multilingual environments. Documents are often written in one context, translated in another, and then used by people with different linguistic backgrounds, different levels of expertise, and different professional roles. The audience is also more varied than we sometimes assume. So the same content may be read by operators, technicians, maintenance staff, trainers, and of course, translators. And each of these users approaches the text with different needs and different expectations, but all of them depend on the information being clear and consistent. This is why technical language is not simply a stylistic issue. It has a direct effect on comprehension and usability. Because when writing is unclear or ambiguous or overly complex, the result may be misunderstanding, slower task performance, inconsistent interpretation, or difficulty in translation. And in some contexts, especially safety-related or time-critical ones, the impact can be more serious. Poor language choices can contribute to human factor-related risks. So this is one of the main reasons why structured approaches such as ASD STE 100, which I will from now on call STE for short, are so valuable. They help to make technical information clearer, more consistent, and easier to use across languages and other user groups. This becomes especially clear when we move into safety critical environments. In these environments, language is part of the safety system, because if instructions are unclear, people do not just misunderstand them in an abstract sense. They make the wrong action. They may take the wrong action. So this is where human factors become relevant. If you're not familiar with human factors, these are the conditions that can influence how people perform tasks. So they include a set of physical conditions or psychological conditions, workplace environment, or communication quality. In aviation, which is also my, let's say, previous professional background, these human factors are known as the dirty dozen, because it's a list of, let's say, 12 main related factors. So we cannot eliminate human error, but we can manage the conditions that can make the error more likely. And when we look at incident data, we can see how important this is. Across safety critical industries, studies have consistently shown that a very high proportion of incidents involve human factors. Documentation often plays a very strong role in that picture. Unclear instructions, missing steps, ambiguous terminology, or inconsistent procedures. So clear communication is not just a nice extra. It's not something that is nice to have. It's practical safety control. So this is also why frameworks such as the Dirty Dozen and the Swiss cheese model, which I'll show you now, are useful here. The Dirty Dozen, which is the list of human factors, doesn't exist to blame individuals, but it helps us to identify some practical countermeasures that can reduce the likelihood that human error will lead to an incident. One of those countermeasures is clear documentation. So if you take a look at this simple visual of the Swiss cheese model, it makes the same point. So there are several barriers, but where weaknesses, which are the holes in the cheese, align, the error can pass through. And documentation is often the last barrier before the final action. So if the instruction is unclear, there may be nothing left to stop the error. So this brings us directly to the next point. When does language itself become a risk? Unclear technical language is, as I mentioned before, not just a quality issue. In some situations, it can become a risk factor. And this happens especially when the wording makes the intended action harder to understand, harder to perform, or easier to misinterpret. There are three common problems. The first one is ambiguity. So a sentence may allow for more than one interpretation, or it may become unclear what a pronoun, an instruction, or a condition refers to. The second problem is complexity. So if a sentence is too long, too dense, or poorly structured, the reader may struggle to identify the action that they actually need to perform. In one of the first talks this morning, cognitive overload was mentioned. And the third common problem is inconsistency. If terminology changes unnecessarily, or instructions are presented in different ways with a different pattern, users may hesitate or interpret the information differently. So in practice, this can lead to misunderstanding, slower task performance, rework, and from a, let's say, practical writer point of view, problems in translation. When we're talking about safety-related or time-sensitive context, even a small misunderstanding can have much wider consequences. That's why clarity and consistency are not simply stylistic preferences, they're part of the risk reduction in technical communication. And accident investigations show us that this approach is not just theoretical. When documentation is unclear, the consequences can be extremely serious. Injuries, equipment damage, fires, explosion, environmental incidents. That's why documentation should be seen as a safety critical component of operations and not just an administrative output. And we have some documented evidence to support this point. Just a quick statistic. Chirp Maritime reviewed 45 accident reports involving documentation problems. Among the findings were missing or difficult manuals and inadequate operating instructions. And 20 of these incidents resulted in injury to personnel. So this is a real and documented problem and just not a theoretical concern for writers and translators. So the key question becomes very practical. How do we write instructions that can reduce ambiguity, support safe decision-making, and at the same time remain easy to understand under pressure? So this is really the question behind everything in this presentation. The answer, my answer, because I am passionate about controlled natural languages, is of course a controlled natural language, which is CNLs are structured forms of language that are designed to improve clarity and reduce ambiguity. They do not replace natural language, they guide it. And STE, ASD STE 100 is one of the best known examples in technical communication. So let's look a little more closely at what exactly ASD STE 100 is. It's a controlled language standard for technical documentation. It was developed in the late 1970s in aerospace and defense, but its relevance extends well beyond those sectors. It combines writing rules with a controlled dictionary in order to make technical content clearer, more consistent, and easier to translate. So the goal is not to simplify the subject matter, but to reduce unnecessary complexity in the language that is used to express it. And for this reason, it's just worth situating the standard briefly within its institutional context. So brief point of context, STE, ASD, STE 100 is not an informal guide, it's an established standard, and the copyright and trademark belong to ASD, the Aerospace, Security and Defense Industries Association of Europe. So this institutional framework can help explain both its authority and its long-term maintenance. So to understand why this standard has such a lasting value, it helps to look briefly at its history from the development to its current status. In very short form, there are 4 key points here. STE emerged in the aerospace, where documentation had to be precise and ambiguous, and it was originally developed to write maintenance documentation for aircraft, because around the world, not all the technicians were native English language speakers. So the documentation had to be clear so that no errors were conducted or occurred during aircraft maintenance, and the aircraft remained airworthy. Second, STE developed through international collaboration. So from the beginning, it has had a multilingual and cross-border dimension. The standard is maintained by the Simplified Technical English Maintenance Group, which is a group of slightly over 20 professionals with engineering backgrounds or linguistic backgrounds, quality assurance specialists who have collaborated not only in the original, let's say, conception and development of the standard, starting from 40 years ago, but they continue to develop and improve the standard itself with meetings and integrating feedback from users to improve the standard and make it relevant across industries and also across linguistic backgrounds. So this continuous evolution has occurred over time in response to changing communication needs and also to advancements in technologies. Fourth, it's become a recognized standard whose principles have now reached well beyond aerospace. So the timeline on the next slide will just show you quickly how this evolution occurred. So in 1979 until 1983, the Simplified Technical English Maintenance Group, which was originally named AECMA, working group, they began a conceptual phase. So they decided to develop this language, this guide, by extracting from documentation, from a huge corpus of documentation, recurring phraseology, recurring verbs, then removing verbs, words, or adjectives that could be considered ambiguous. And then as it became as a guide, because its first release was Simplified English Guide in 1986, it then became a specification until issue 8, and then in issue 9, STE was formally recognized as a standard. And at the same time, through this, let's say, development of its designation, the scope of STE broadened from aircraft maintenance documentation to technical documentation in general. So this is one reason why it's relevant to a much wider community today than it was 40 years ago. And even its name tells us something about its purpose. So what's in a name? Each part of its name is meaningful. So simplified refers to improved comprehension, especially in international contexts. So it is not simple to write, but it is simple to read and to understand. Technical tells us that the standard is intended for technical text. So because it focuses on the removal of ambiguity and nuance in terminology and choice of words, it would be very difficult to write, let's say, a novel or a poem in STE, because that type of literature thrives on leaving open the interpretation on the part of the reader, whereas STE focuses on technical documentation and technical information. English reflects the role of English as a widely understood and used working language in engineering and science, and 100 is a historical reference and a tribute to ATA 100, which was the first international specification, which in 1987 first included the requirement to write in accordance with STE. So where does STE make a practical difference? STE makes a difference in several areas at once. It supports safety by making instructions clearer. It improves documentation quality and consistency by standardizing terminology and structure. And I will never stress enough the importance of preliminary terminology management, because often, and especially as a translator, I have seen this, terminology is sort of overlooked or is something that comes after. Whereas when we write in STE, it is important to have a validated term-based terminology and reference material. STE also supports efficiency because a clearer source text is obviously easier to review, to update, to reuse, and finally to translate. So today I'm especially focusing on safety, but these benefits are connected, of course. This is also why STE continues to adapt well to newer communication environments. Sorry, my slide is not moving forward. Yeah, here. So STE is not only relevant to traditional manuals, it can also work very well with digital and modular documentation, with training and onboarding contexts, and increasingly with AI-related applications such as machine translation, natural language processing, and chatbot support. So in other words, clear and controlled language is not less relevant in digital environments. Actually, it may be even more relevant. And the range of users, which has developed and increased over the years, reflects this broader relevance. So this slide introduces or shows you the distribution of the standard across the types of users. The data is derived from the distribution log. We receive requests for a copy, and we ask anyone who requests documents to specify their industry or their country or their native language. And this not only helps us gain statistics and information on the current or increasing type of users. This information that we gather when we distribute a copy of the standard also helps us to, let's say, guide the new issue of the standard towards maybe an emerging interest in a different industry, such as maybe renewable energy or medical devices that was not present in so much in the previous issue. So this percentage of the distribution statistics shows us that while the aerospace, defense, and civil aviation still remains a strong core number or value within the users, we have industrial maintenance, translation and language services, transport, medical energy, IT-related areas, and also I'm happy because here we have a great audience in the academia, also academia and research. So this broader spread is important because it shows that the core principles of STE, which were born for and developed for a very niche sector and for a very niche and restricted purpose, are transferable to other sectors and other types and a different user base. But at the same time, FTE is often misunderstood. Why? Because the word simplified can create the wrong impression. So STE is not basic English, and it's not a reduced version of technical knowledge. It's controlled technical English. And it's not only for native speakers, and it is not only a dictionary. And although it originated in aerospace, its principles can apply much more widely. So the purpose is not to reduce the expertise of the author or of the text in itself, but to communicate this expertise much more clearly to the final reader. We heard this morning, again, multiple times during the presentation, that the focus has to be on the reader, on the end user of your text. So let me now introduce STE in its essential parts. So in a nutshell, the structure of ASD STE 100 is very straightforward, but also very effective. It's built on two main components, which are the writing rules and a control dictionary. So the writing rules help structure the information clearly, whereas the dictionary controls the use of a general vocabulary by defining the approved meanings and the parts of speech. At the same time, STE allows company terminology or specialized technical terms where needed. So the strength of STE, in actual fact, lies in the interaction between the sentence structure and the word choice. So let me begin with the first of the two components, the concept of the writing rules. The writing rules are meant to control how technical information is expressed at a sentence or paragraph level, depending on if we are writing procedural or descriptive writing. The writing rules are there to support clarity, precision, readability, and consistency. So their goal is not simply to make the text shorter. Their goal is to make technical content easier to read, easier to interpret, easier to use correctly. And when we are talking about task-oriented content, so instructions, this makes a real difference. The next slide will show how these rules are organized. So the writing rules are not there to restrict expression for its own sake. They are there to support clear instruction and reliable interpretation. I don't want to go through, and we don't have time because we would need a couple of days to go through all 55 rules in detail, but this slide will give you a sense of the structure. So the rules cover words, multi-word nouns, verbs, so for example, which verb forms and which verb tenses we can use, sentences, rules for procedural writing and rules for descriptive writing. So procedural writing gives instructions and descriptive writing gives information. It includes rules for safety instructions, punctuation, and word count, and also some general writing practices. So at this point, it's useful to give you a few concrete examples of the kind of things that the writing rules promote. So one principle is sentence length and control. We heard this morning, again, the KISS principle, keep it short and simple. Long, overloaded sentences are harder to process, especially in procedures. And another principle is directness. So we write in the imperative form if we are writing instructions, talking directly to the reader, as if we were standing behind the person who is reading the instruction and telling them what to do. So instructions should also make the required action visible as quickly as possible. And these rules encourage, of course, the use of clear action verbs, very rarely and only in descriptive writing and only in certain cases where the agent is unknown can we use the passive form. Otherwise, the active voice is the voice that we should use in when we write our text in STE. Why? Because in technical communication, the reader should not have to guess what needs to be done and who needs to perform the action. And similarly, the structure of the sentence should make all these relationships clear. Who does what, to what, and under which condition. And then we have another important area, which is the avoidance of ambiguous references. Pronouns, we saw a couple of examples this morning, vague modifiers, unclear links between clauses. All of these can easily create confusion in procedural writing, and even small ambiguities can affect interpretation. So all of these rules are practical, and they guide the writer towards a language that is easier to read, to interpret, and to use correctly. So it's a systematic framework and not just a set of loose tips. So we cannot choose of these 53 rules which ones we want to apply and which not. We have to obey all of the 53 rules in STE if we want to say that our text is compliant with the standard. And then the second major component in STE is the dictionary. So the dictionary is, let's say, the second core element, and its function is to control the use of general English vocabulary in technical documentation. And the dictionary does this in a very practical way. For each approved word, the dictionary specifies the accepted and approved meaning or definition, and where relevant, the approved part of speech. This is important because many English words can have several meanings or several grammatical functions, and this can create ambiguity in technical texts, especially if the reader is not a native English speaker. So the dictionary helps us to reduce problems such as synonymy, where different words are used for the same idea, or polysemy, where one word can carry multiple meanings. And by narrowing these possibilities, STE will make language choices more precise and more consistent. It's also important to note that the dictionary is not intended to replace technical terminology, and this brings me back to terminology management. So the focus of the dictionary is only on general vocabulary, and the approved words in the dictionary are sufficient to write any type of technical text. But then, according to the subject field, it will be necessary to have a set of specific subject field terminology. So technical nouns, so noun type terms, or technical verbs, verb type terms, are and can still be used when necessary. The dictionary just makes the surrounding language, the language that surrounds these specialized terms, more controlled and more predictable. So in other words, it makes language more precise and predictable, and this predictability is valuable for writers, users, reviewers, and translators alike. And the next slide will show you how the dictionary is organized. The dictionary has 4 columns. All words are in bold typeface. If the word is in uppercase, the dictionary tells us that this word can be used because it is approved in STE. If the word in the dictionary is in lowercase, so in this case, for example, the adjective uniform, the first column tells us that this word cannot be used because it is not approved in STE. Therefore, you're going to have to use a different word or a different sentence construction to replace this word. In the second column, for approved words, so in this case, for example, the adjective applicable, the column will give us the approved meaning or definition of an approved word in STE. The text in this column is not in STE. So for the adjective applicable, we have the approved meaning, which is correct or satisfactory for the task. So if the meaning is not given in the dictionary, or if the meaning is different, you cannot use the word in that meaning, and you will have to use an alternative one. And we'll see how to do that. In the second column, which can be also related to words that are not approved. So for example, here we have the noun addition, which is written in lowercase, so in the first column, so we know that it's not approved. And the second column will give you the approved suggested alternative that you can use to replace a word that is not approved. Okay, these are only suggestions. You may also have other solutions. This is particularly interesting when we have a suggested replacement that has a different part of speech. So here we have, we cannot use the noun addition, and the suggested alternative is to use the verb add. Okay, so this then leads us, and so the second column either gives us a definition for words that are approved, uppercase in the first column, or the alternatives for words that are not approved, therefore words that are in lowercase in the third column. And the next two columns, so the third one and the fourth one, illustrate the usage. So in column number 3, we have an example, an STE compliant example. So we have an approved word here, the noun position. We have the definition, the attitude or setting of something that you can adjust, or the place or site where you put something. And then we have one or sometimes more than one example in the third column. The examples here are written in uppercase just to give you an immediate visual help that this example is correctly written and compliant in STE. So column 3 shows you an STE example, but it's even more interesting when we need to see the contrast in column number 4, which is only present for words that are not approved. So for example, as you see here, we have the noun position is approved, we have the definition, and we have the examples, but the verb to position is not approved. We have two suggested alternatives: to use the verb put or to use the verb set according to the context. And here, column number 4 will give us an example about how the verb position is used in a non-compliant example. For example, position the bracket on the frame. And we have in column 3 the STE compliant example, so the rewriting using the suggested approved alternative. And one important clarification at this point will concern technical terminology. So as I mentioned before, the dictionary only includes general, let's say, technical or language. But STE doesn't eliminate technical terminology. Of course, it's impossible to list all the possible terms in different subject fields in a controlled dictionary, because they evolve over time, because they change according to the country, because some may become obsolete between one issue and another, and that is not the purpose of the controlled dictionary. The purpose of the controlled dictionary is to give you the correct framework. Then, of course, you choose the terms, be they nouns or be they verbs, that you need according to your type of documentation. So the controlled dictionary will focus only on general vocabulary, but as we know, technical documentation also depends on nouns and verbs that are necessary for a specific subject field. And technical nouns allow writers to identify components, systems, tools, materials, processes with the required precision. Technical verbs are equally important because many technical actions cannot be expressed accurately with general language verbs. And in specialized contexts, we know that the language must remain technically correct. So the purpose of STE is not to replace terminology with a simpler or, let's say, dumbed down and less accurate wording. The purpose is to control the surrounding general language so that the technical content can be expressed more clearly and more consistently. This is a very important distinction. So STE reduces unnecessary ambiguity in general English, but it makes room for the terminology that a specific domain genuinely needs. So the key requirement is that technical nouns and technical verbs should be used carefully, consistently, and in ways that are applicable and appropriate to the subject field and understandable to the intended audience. That is why it's important before starting your project to validate your specific terminology so that not only you will be using it consistently and correctly, but if you approve and validate a particular technical noun or technical verb, you will be giving it, at least in your simple term-based glossary entry, at least its designation, its part of speech, and its definition. And I don't know how many of you have already started working full-time in translation, but the importance of having a validated glossary, even if you don't have the equivalent in the language that you are working to, the equivalent is not there yet, but you have a specific and correct definition for the term, this in your term base, this will help you choose the correct equivalent and validate it in the target language. So the next example here, I want to show you how the approved meanings of an approved word work in practice. So of the 53 rules here, I've chosen rule 1.3, and this rule says use approved words. So we know words that in the first column of the dictionary are in uppercase only with their approved meaning. So the meaning, the definition that is given in the second column of the dictionary. So let me show you here a familiar example. Here we have the verb to follow, and then we have listed the verb forms and verb tenses, but I won't go into that for now. Here, the approved meaning of the approved verb to follow is in the sense of to come after or to go after. This is why the next contrast matters. Actually, for this verb, we also have a sort of a help, which is not present in all of the dictionary entries, that tells us, watch out for other meanings, use obey. So if you see the approved examples, here we have the test follows the installation of the high pressure pump. So something that occurs subsequently in a sequence in time, or do the procedure that follows this block of text, or follow the green lights to the nearest staircase. But the non-STE example, when you use this material, follow the manufacturer's instructions. And this is a very typical sentence that you will find maybe in 80% of your user manuals. Follow the manufacturer's instructions. In STE, it is when you use this material, obey the manufacturer's instructions. Why? Because we do not follow the safety instruction in a physical sense. So the meaning, the approved meaning and the definition of the words in STE is usually also much more concrete and less abstract than what we are used to. So in this context, obey is the approved choice and not followed. This final example will make the distinction clearer. I can write in my text, obey the safety instructions that follow, because follow is fine for sequence, so they follow subsequently in my text, but not for meanings such as obey. Or of course, I could write, obey the emergency plan, which is my document that gives me emergency instructions, and follow, physically follow, the green lights to the emergency exit. So from word meaning, I now want to move to a more user-centered benefit, which is usability. Usability is another important way to understand the value of STE. So in technical communication, usability is not just about layout, navigation, or screen design. It's also about whether the language helps the user find, understand, and act on this information effectively. And STE supports usability because it makes technical content easier to process. Clear sentence structure, more direct instructions, and more controlled vocabulary helps the users identify the action they need to take without unnecessary effort. So this is especially important in task-based documentation, instructions, or safety-critical conditions where the user needs to move quickly from reading to doing. STE also helps with scanning, visually scanning. In many real contexts, people don't read technical documents from the beginning to the end. They look for the relevant step, the condition, the warning, or the instruction. And if the language is dense or vague or inconsistent, this process can become slower and, more importantly, it can become less reliable. So usability is closely connected to language quality. And a technically correct sentence is not always a usable sentence. STE helps narrow that gap by making the information not only accurate with the correct terminology and choice of words, but also easier to use in practice. Another dictionary-related issue is the part of speech that is assigned to a specific entry in the dictionary. Rule 1.2 says use approved words from the dictionary, so those words that are in uppercase in the first column of the dictionary, only as the approved part of speech. And I want to give you an example, is the word check. Okay, we know that in English, a word can have different functions. And in English, the word check can function as a noun, do a check of the hydraulic system, but it can also function as a verb, check the casting for corrosion. So why, when the fathers of STE, when they started doing term extraction in the corpus of documentation, why did they decide that check should be used as a noun, even though it is less frequently used as a noun in everyday English, and not as a verb? Because it can have different meanings. So the same word check, if I use it as a verb, it can give different information. If I say check that it is safe to supply electrical power, in actual fact, I am telling the user, make sure that it is safe to supply technical power. Okay, this is maybe the first general and immediate meaning, but oftentimes we could also find this information. Check the trailer axle, which in actual fact means measure the trailer axle. So here, check as a verb, it was decided that it would not be approved in STE because it is too broad and too ambiguous, and it is better to address the reader and the user and the operator to a more specific and defined action. So STE pushes the writer towards more precise verbs. check the pipes for corrosion. If I want to replace the verb check with another verb, I would write examine the pipe for corrosion. Or maybe I would write do a corrosion test, or address the user to a specific corrosion testing procedure, etc. But using check only as a verb makes our test too, let's say, too vague. This leads us to precision, the importance of precision when we are using technical nouns. So nouns that do not have a definition in the dictionary because they are not present in the dictionary, but I have validated them in my glossary. Rule 1.10 says don't use regional slang, jargon words as technical nouns. So here we have an example. During logging operations, attach a choker to the heavy machinery to hold the logs in their position. Not everybody knows what a choker is, and in particular, it is a regional term that is used in Australia and New Zealand in the logging industry. But the correct term, in this case, a correct technical noun that can be easily understood by anyone, even outside that region, is to write during logging operation, attach a cable to the heavy machinery to hold the logs in their position. So the point is to avoid local or field-specific jargon when there is, in actual fact, a clearer term that is available. Next examples make this also quite obvious. Make a sandwich with 2 washers and a spacer. It would possibly also not be very tasty to eat a sandwich made with 2 metal parts, but in actual fact here, the correct and instruction that avoids the use of something that is can be unclear or misleading for the audience is install the spacer between the 2 washers. So the sandwich would be, let's say figuratively, the 2 washers as if they were, the 2 slices of toast. Or again, remove your gear from the work area. This is a very North American term, which in actual fact means tools and equipment, or when we talk about even sporting gear. But here, it's not the gear which is the mechanical part in a unit or in, I don't know, a pump or something. So, the rotating gear. Here, the word gear is used informally, and it is obviously quite well understood by, let's say, the specific audience who is maybe going to work with that document and that instruction, but it might not be understood by the translator, because the translator maybe goes to look for, do I have to remove the gear from the unit, from the work area? So it can also cause not only confusion from the reader, but also a wrong translation in the second part. So this leads us to FTE and translatability. And one of the key strengths of FTE is its contribution to translatability. And in multilingual environments, the quality of the source text has a direct effect on the quality of the translation. And if the original wording is ambiguous, inconsistent, or unnecessarily complex, these problems don't disappear in translation, unless, of course, the translation is perfect, excellent, professional. In many cases, they become even more difficult to manage. So STE helps by making the source text clear and controlled. Because when the sentence structure is predictable and the word choice is precise, translators can identify the intended meaning more easily. Even segments created within a cut tool from a source text that is written in STE are much more easy to translate into the target text. and this reduces the risk of misinterpretation, and it helps you to support translation decision. And again, as I mentioned before, the important point about terminology, because when the language is used consistently, translators are in a better position to maintain the equivalent consistency in the target language. And this is especially valuable in documentation sets that involve repeated content, so content that you can also reuse and leverage in your CAT tool, for example, or in your documentation management system. And so STE doesn't just help the writer and the reader, it helps everyone downstream in the communication process, including translators, reviewers, and localization teams. So in that sense, translatability is not a secondary benefit, it's one of the practical outcomes of clear source language text. And now I just want to show you what it looks like in real sentence. Here, the sentence in pink introduces a short example of a problematic technical writing. Here, the idea is not that the sentence is impossible to understand, okay? But it requires more effort than it should, and it leaves too much room for interpretation. So we have several issues. First, the sentence is too dense. Look how long, I don't know how many words, probably 35 or 40. It packs multiple actions and conditions into a single structure because we have carried out the removal, ensure something has been isolated, deal with something, and the agent also here is unclear. The wording doesn't directly say who is responsible for carrying out the task. And some expressions are vague, especially the phrase dealt with appropriately. It doesn't really tell the reader what to do. It has nominalization instead of indirect phrasing, and this makes the instruction heavier and less direct. Whereas in technical and procedural context, not giving a clear action can slow down comprehension and make interpretation difficult. So this is exactly a type of text that can benefit from an STE-based rewrite, because the goal is not only to shorten it, but to make the action, the sequence, and the responsibility clear. Here, just an example of STE-oriented rewrite. So the first step when we need to rewrite something in STE is to analyze the structure. And before changing the individual words and using the approved words and verb forms and word count, etc., in those 53 rules, we have to identify the main action, separate the different ideas more quickly. So in the original sentence, there's too much information compressed into a single structure. Second improvement is to make the action more visible. So instead of the nominalized expression carrying out the removal of the unit, the rewrite uses the more direct verb remove. See, we are writing directly addressing the reader. Before you remove the unit, you make sure that it is correctly isolated. So this gives the sentence clear procedural focus. The third change is to make the second action more explicit. So rather than saying that components should be dealt with appropriately, which says everything and nothing, according to the context, okay, I chose this solution. If there are components that can cause interference with the procedure, remove or safety them. So at this stage, once we have clarified the structure here, the goal is not really perfect in the wording, but the first idea is to create a structure that is clear, direct, and easy. And once that structure is in place, the wording can be defined further because we split the overloaded information, make the sequence visible, and replace wording that is vague or not approved. Wording that is vague or not approved also, of course, means that we have to replace words or verb sentences that are verb tenses that are not approved. One example of a verb form that is not approved in STE is verbs using the ing form of a verb because this rule 3.5, limits the use of the ing form to a technical noun, so making it a noun and not a verb form, or a modifier, an adjectival modifier of a technical noun. Let me show you why this matters. In STE, continuous verb forms are avoided because they can make the sentence heavier and less direct. If you look at the solution here rewritten in STE, apart from the fact that it is shorter, it is also clearer. It makes this sentence direct. So we have a present instead of a present continuous, and then we have an imperative, okay? That this obey replaces that make sure that you are obeying, so we replace with one word what we were saying here with 5. And part of the reason is also that words that end in ing can have different functions in STE. So a word that ends with ing can be part of the verb tense that describes a continuing action in the present or in the past. Be careful when the door is opening. Or it can be used as an adjective. An opening door can be dangerous, okay? Or it can be part of a noun or of a noun phrase. Opening a door can be dangerous. And this is where ambiguity becomes more obvious. This example is obviously very exaggerated to show you all of this sentence where we have, for example, a noun, clothing, which ends in ing, and this is correct. Then we have a noun or gerund, okay, an ing form that describes a concrete action, observing, wearing, smoking. During here, then we can have prepositions, or we can have adjectives and modifiers, or here when you are working a present continuous. So this is just, of course, an exaggerated example, but to show you that several words that end with ing have different grammatical role in the same sentence. This can cause a lot of confusion for non-native English speakers when they read, and also maybe for a translator who is translating from English into their own native language, because some behave like nouns, some belong to verb phrases, and some function as modifiers. So STE does not allow the ing verb form, but of course you can use words that end in ing when they are an adjective that modifies or is part of a technical noun, because together here riveting machine gives me, let's say, a specific concept that can be defined and classified as a technical noun. So we are nearly there and perfectly on time. 2 more examples here. We have another sentence where we have a rewritten sentence that gives us the same verbs but written in, let's say, a logical and chronological order, because if I have an information here that says after lifting the cover, I need to put this information correctly in its own specific point in the sentence. So we have some verbs that are not approved, for example, the verb secure or the verb to dispose. Lift, the verb to lift is approved, but we cannot use the ing form, okay? The verb secure is not approved, so we replace it with attach. The verb dispose is not approved, so we replace it with discard, etc. And as you see here, the sentences, instead of having one long run-on sentence that goes on for 5 lines, we have 3 different work steps that give the reader a clear instruction. Because ST is a controlled natural language with a restricted vocabulary, and you don't know if the word that you want to use, what to do with it, the document also contains a flowchart which can help you, especially in the beginning, when you need to decide if a word that maybe is not in the dictionary, can I use it, can I not use it, or do I need to refer and validate my term in the term base, can I use it, or do I need to use an approved word that has a different meaning with a different part of speech, and then we will have, let's say, possible solutions. So here is your link to download your free official copy of ASD STE 100 issue 9. This QR code will lead you to just a very simple Google form that is based on the Simplified Technical English Maintenance Group website. The information that you insert, such as your country, your email, if you wish to receive information or to be invited to events that, or maybe the online forum that we organize, this will also help us to establish statistics on the type of user base, and the document is free for use and distribution. So compared to an ISO standard, it is not a paid document. You are free to distribute it to your colleagues, but we would prefer for everyone to make their request. The download is then immediate and automatic, so that the distribution statistics help us work towards the new issues. I will be putting, if the organizing committee agrees, a PDF copy of these slides in the chat, or I don't know if maybe the organizing committee wants to send you the PDF later. So if you don't have the time now to download it, you can always go to the STMG website, and here are some is a link if you are interested about reading a little more about human factor related risks. There is some articles about each of the different, let's say the 12 most important risks in aviation, but they can be considered for any kind of industry, together with the suggested and recommended countermeasures for each risk. And if you are interested in learning more about STE, about the history, about the Simplified Technical English Maintenance Group, if you wish and you are happy and willing to participate in our national or multi-country support teams that meet twice a year, usually online, we welcome all backgrounds, all kinds of experiences, and we really look forward to interacting with the audience and the users, because that is what keeps the development of the standard relevant. So I think that on the perfect 15 quarter past, I managed to keep the timing online. Thank you for your attention. I look forward to keeping in touch. This is my email address, and I am happy to take any questions. I hope I didn't speak too quick, but I really wanted to compress as much information as possible.
Yes, thank you very much for your presentation. So many examples and so many explanations, and we are glad that we had this opportunity to participate in your presentation, in your conference, Daniela. Thank you very much for all the pieces of information that you shared with us. Yes, I think that we agree that you can put your presentation in the chat, and all people interested in this topic can download it. And I think that we have some questions in the chat also. Can you see them, or do you want that
I see we have one question from Nadia Camarena. Are there any other controlled natural languages besides English? This is usually, actually the first question until a few years ago was, Can we, is there a computer software that writes in STE? That was usually the first question before the AI revolution. So yes, STE is one of the, of course, best known examples of controlled natural languages, but it's not the only one. In Italy, we have Italiano Tecnico Semplificato, which was developed by Commentech, the Italian Association for Technical Communication. And it is similar to STE, but of course, the rules are different because one thing is creating rules and a dictionary for a Romance language, and one from a Germanic language. For English, we don't have to worry about, genders or gender neutral, etc. Whereas for Italian or French or Spanish, this is a completely different setup. So we have Italiano Tecnico Semplificato. And for French, there is Français Rationalisé, which was developed by GIFAS, the French Association for Aeronautical Industry. But after a few years, the project sort of reached no further development, and it has now been taken on by some researchers in the University of Padova, and they're working on a new version called Français Contrôlé. I don't know how long the research project is, but it is already, well structured. So it's going to be let's say, an adjusted and modernized and more relevant version of Français Rationalisé. And then there is also Español Técnico Simplificado, developed by Ilaria Gobbi, Italian researcher, but with Spanish native background, developed again as a university project in the University of Padova. A huge effort because was done, let's say, single-handedly. So while FTE can count on 40 years of hundreds of people who have worked in the background during the meetings, developing a controlled natural language single-handedly is hats off, really. So based again on STE, and I believe that the second version, the updated version, has come out or will be published shortly. So let's say that these are the three main ones. I don't know, do you have anything similar in Romanian? Huh?
I don't know.
A project for you then. Then there was another question was, what would be the difference between plain language and STE? I don't know, maybe somebody who listened to the plain and clear language presentation this morning wants to give the answer instead of me. Huh? Nope.
I do not think that there is someone that was present during the first part of during the morning session, because
Okay.
students connected only for this
Okay.
part.
Right. Okay. So well, FTE was particularly born and developed and is used for technical documentation. Whereas, as we saw even this morning in the presentation, plain language, clear language is, let's say, the philosophy behind a communication for any kind of user of multiple types of documentation, but let's say more information like government or legal or regulatory information like on the EU website. Whereas the, let's say that the audience and the reader of documentation written in STE knows that the content is technical. So it also, it does include, let's say, more technical information. But as I mean, the principles and the guidelines of STE are definitely not in contrast with plain English and plain language. In actual fact, STE has been mentioned in one of the reference documents of the ISO standard on plain language. So we are also very proud of that.
Thank you so much for your answers. If there are any other questions or comments or remarks or curiosities.
Hello to everybody, and Daniela, of course. I have no questions, as a matter of fact, because everything you stated, everything you presented was clear. Clear language, clear content, in line with the principle of STE. So I don't have any questions. It was very, very clear stated. It was a real pleasure, yes, to be here to attend your presentation. And I have to thank you not only in my name, and on the part of the organizers, but also in the name of our members, Take Home Romania, because you are, first of all, our guest. And of course, the people, the organizers have adopted you, and we hope to have the opportunity to have another time also as a guest for our webinars, Take Home Romania. I don't want to advertise now our activity, but you are welcome, and all the other speakers are also welcome. Thanks again. It was great. It was
Thank
great.
you. I just see that I think I'm not able to attach the file in the chat. So, Andrea, if you agree, I will send you the
Exactly.
PDF, and then anybody, I don't know if you have like your SharePoint or something for your students, or in any case, the
Yes, and
ASDSP 100 website.
I will write down my email address in the chat, and
Okay,
if there are people who want to receive this presentation, they can write to me.
perfect. And if you find any typos, let me know.
Thank you once again, Daniela, for your presentation. And now, at the end of our conference, we would like to thank again all our keynote speakers, all our audience for this the conference day that was very interesting and very useful for every part involved in the organization and in the organization of this conference. Now, at the end of this conference, I would like to invite Daniela Badia to address a message and to close this conference day.
Thank you very much, Andrea, and thank you very much to all our speakers of today. They were very interesting presentations, and I learned a lot as well. And I am happy to see that we had quite a good turnout. For the afternoon, I was a bit worried because of the big lunch break that we had in between. I would just like to say that I'm posting again the link to our participant survey in the chat, because you said there are a lot of people that have connected now for this session especially. And please fill it in, because it helps us to tailor our next events function of your feedback. This is all from me for now. Thank you very much for the cooperation and the help with organizing this event. Thank you, Andrea. Thank you to the Department of Applied Modern Languages of the University of Babes-Bolyai, and to TechCom. And well, I give the floor back to you to send us all on our way.
Thank you. Have a lovely afternoon, and we hope to see each other in other conferences organized together and on other topics or similar topics. Thank you so much once again, and have a lovely afternoon. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.